right. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know we've got a few other folks that are logging in with us as we go, and that's okay. But we want to honor time and get wrap this up by 6. So we're gonna get started on today's college planning and strategy seminar. I do want to first just make sure everyone knows that this is being recorded for replay purposes. And if you only are able to get bits and pieces, you'll also be able to go back and listen to this in its entirety. Again, today we are talking about college planning and strategy, really geared towards high school students. And we're very fortunate to have with us Cozy Wittman, who's from College Inside Track. And yeah, hi, Cozy. And it's going to be, I just think you're going to really enjoy this. I've known Cozy really through reading her articles in the Journal of Financial Planning through the years, and also got the privilege late last fall to hear her at a Financial Planning Association event. So I think you're in for a real treat with all the changes in the college landscape. I think this is really timely. And I know many of you have high schoolers, so we are very tuned in, those of us in that zone. With that, I'm going to hand over to Cozy. If we do run out of time, just reach out to myself or Greg, of course, for any further clarity. But Cozy, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Matt. Huge thank you for you to invite me to speak to your clients. I'm certainly excited to be here. As Matt indicated, there are a lot of changes to the college landscape. And one thing that people aren't always aware of is that college landscape has been changing, little ripples under your feet that you maybe haven't even noticed over the last 20 years. But over the last 4 years, we've actually seen pretty monumental changes. I would liken it to you literally ripping out all of your landscaping and deciding to start over to some degree, right? So what I want to do today is give you a little peek behind the curtain, if you will. If you're unfamiliar with College Inside Track, we've actually been helping families navigate the college search process for going on 17 years now. Our goal is always the same: right fit. And this should be the same for you. So as you think about this, we are always working to help our clients find right fit schools for their students. That would be right academic fit for the student, right social fit for the student, and then ultimately the right financial fit for your family. And we're going to touch on all 3 of these today. And then if you have a high schooler, I'm going to assume you do since you joined today, you know that this process can be stressful sometimes. So part of our job, of course, is to help reduce the stress that can come just naturally as part of college search. So we're going to start here. I always liken college search to working on cars. I probably think about it that way because my husband's a car guy. He is restoring a 77 Toyota Land Cruiser. And when Paul pops the hood of that vehicle, it looks like this, right? Parts and pieces, pretty easy to identify. You can get your hands in there and start working on things. And you can do that because you have the tools sitting right in the garage to get that work done. So that's the way college search used to look. Pretty straightforward, very transparent. It could be done relatively easily. Like many things, though, over the last 30 years, things have gotten a little bit more complex, just like our cars, right? So when I tell Paul, hey, there's something up with my vehicle, he always tells me the same thing: call the mechanic, Cozy. And he tells me that because when you pop the hood of my vehicle, this is what it looks like, right? Everything is smashed in there. You have to take out a whole bunch of parts sometimes to get to some of the parts and pieces. They're hard to identify because they're all layered in there. But most importantly, we don't have the right tools, right? We don't have that diagnostic computer sitting in our garages. And the colleges are very similar, right? Most families lack the tools today because the colleges lack transparency. They lack transparency around the way they price their product, and they lack transparency around how they're going to accept students and what kind of criteria you need to have to help your student get in. And so what I want to do today is just kind of peel back the curtains a little bit and give you a view into how the colleges are actually thinking today. We're going to kick this off with a quiz, and I know you don't have the option to participate, but that's okay. You can choose your answers, play along at home. So as a percentage, how much has tuition increased nationally at our public institutions since 1990? Have the tuitions increased by 73%, 106%, 180%, or 213%? So I'll give you a chance to choose your favorite option. Public schools have increased their tuition nationally on average 213%. And by comparison, our private schools have gone up by 415%. But before you get out your wet noodles and start lashing those private schools for that outrageous increase, I want you to take a look at some of our flagship universities. These are our state major university, right? So this is a public institution. You can see University of Kansas sitting up here at 641%. I live in Minnesota. Our state university has gone up 570%. Right next door, University of Wisconsin sitting at 1,047%. Michigan at 1,053. The big one that I have run across, University of Connecticut, UConn, has gone up 1,300% in that same time frame. So I think it's important today to stop thinking about schools as public and private, and rather, from a pricing perspective, think about them as flexibly priced and inflexibly priced, because there are public and private schools on both sides of that equation. When we did our college search at my house, I had 5 kids. I told my kids, I don't care where you go, as long as you go to the local public institution, stay in the state, it's going to be less expensive. What I did not know was I was standing solidly in front of some pretty good scholarship money that was going to make it less expensive for us to head out and look at other schools. And so I want to, again, give you a little peek behind the curtain. I want to update you on a few. NYU, for instance, first school in the country to tip over the $90,000 mark. So this is the 2022 cost. The 2023 cost of attendance at New York University is $90,327. So I've got to update my slide, but I was waiting for some of these other schools to announce the 2023 costs. I want to also point out the last 3 here. These are all public institutions. This is the cost to stay in state and go to your local flagship university. And I just want to point out, regardless of how you think about less expensive schools and more expensive schools, I think we can all agree that even if you stay at your local flagship university, $27,000 is not cheap. Right? That's the cost for 1 year. If you have the misfortune to go to or to live in the state of California, just because their schools are so expensive, you can see that if you are a resident of the state of California and you want to go to UC Berkeley, which is their flagship school, it's going to be almost $40,000. In Pennsylvania, they're looking at $36,000 for their flagship school. And these are pretty common numbers. Most of the flagship schools are well over $25,000 a year now. All right, I have another quiz for you. What percentage of students change schools at least one time? Do you think it's 6% of kids, 14% of kids, 25, 38, or 50% of kids make a poor choice the first time and have to change schools? Today, the national transfer rate sits at 38%. So almost 40% of kids who go off to school discover, hey, my first choice, not the right choice. You know why? Because high school students make decisions this way. Cool campus, great sports teams to follow, and I like the food when I toured, right? That's how they're thinking because they're high school students. Here's the thing, though, that you should know. The second that student changes schools and goes from one state school to another state school, it has increased the cost of their degree by $14,000. That is the average cost to change going state school to state school. And guess what? Of this 38% who made a poor choice the first time, 45% of those kids, so almost half of those kids, make a poor choice a second time, and change schools yet again, increasing the cost of their degree by $24,000. Today, right fit, first time is the smart move. I meet families where sometimes parents are like, well, if you don't get it right the first time, no big deal. I don't think most people know that there's actual money associated with that change, right? And that's just to say, start earlier in the process. Give your student time to really dive deeper, think harder, so that they're doing the investigative work before they apply instead of after they get there. All right, so let's talk about the kinds of aid available. There were a couple questions regarding aid, and there were some questions about scholarships, and we're going to address both of those tonight. I want to kick this off by talking about the kinds of aid available, because I find that this is one area with huge amounts of misperception. So I meet with families. I do this all the time. We sit down, we chat college. And one of the things that comes out of people's mouths almost instantaneously when I ask them, tell me what you guys want to talk about. People often kick this off with, well, we're not going to get any financial aid. And what they're actually referring to is need-based aid. But there's an entirely different bucket of money that falls under the heading of financial aid. And so the first thing I want you to know is how the colleges talk about financial aid, because classically, the way that colleges are talking about it and the way that families are talking about are different definitions. So I want to bring you into the world of the colleges, so at least you're speaking the same language. So when you go out to a college website and it says the average student pays, or the average student gets X amount of financial aid, they are not just talking about need-based aid. They are actually also including that second bucket, which is merit-based aid. And guess what? The colleges are usually also referring to loans. So they've mixed all of those together, and that's what they would call financial aid. So their definition is need-based aid, merit-based aid, and loans. So it's important to think about that, because that number that they're showing you may or may not, and in most cases does not, reflect what the price will actually be for you or how much aid your student from your family will actually get. So let's break these down, because these are separate buckets of money with separate criteria driving them. And let's talk about need-based aid. There are two forms that your family may fill out to determine whether or not you have need. The first form, most people are somewhat familiar with. It's called the FAFSA. Some schools use a secondary form. Sometimes it's their own form, but some schools use something called the CSS profile. The FAFSA and the CSS profile kick out a number that today is referred to as the Student Aid Index. This is the first year that is true. This is new verbiage. So on the 2024 FAFSA and beyond, the output of the FAFSA is going to be referred to as the Student Aid Index. Now, if you have an older student, you may recognize verbiage. The old verbiage was expected family contribution. Stick that over here in the recycle bin, because it is not going to be used any longer. Student Aid Index is the verbiage. So for most families, the outcome of the FAFSA is going to be roughly 47% of your adjusted gross income. So what factors make up that very large number? Well, the first thing is your income and your assets as parents. Your income is the single largest factor here. Your income is assessed at 47%, assuming that you are under 65 years old. The other factor that influences your FAFSA, of course, is your students' assets and income, but good news, most kids don't have much of that. So the biggest influencers here are the parents, actually. And there is not today a good way to make or an easy way to make your student independent. So long gone are the days where you can just say, I'm not going to claim my student on my taxes anymore. They're independent. That actually does not work any longer. There are very clear criteria, 8 of them, I think, that would make somebody independent. And most parents aren't interested in most of those. And certainly happy if you're interested in learning more to tell you more. But just rest assured that today, your income, the single largest factor here, which leads me to my first tip. Understand your actual potential for being need-based. I find that people are very poor predictors of that opportunity. About half of the people I meet with who tell me, oh, we're not going to get any need-based aid, actually do qualify at some schools in the country for need-based aid. So get a hold of a FAFSA forecast tool. We use FinAid, F-I-N-A-I-D. It's a very good tool. Understand that potential and then make smart choices. What do I mean by that? I mean, the FAFSA accounts for assets differently whether you are the student or the parent. So student assets are assessed at 20%, where parent assets are only assessed at 5.64%. 529 plan, so if you've been saving in a 529 plan, that's assessed at the parent rate. Even though your student's the beneficiary, you're the owner, and so it's assessed at this very low 5.64%. If you have your money sitting in an UGMA or an UTMA account, you just have to know this is assessed at the student's rate. And my only point here is if this money that you have sitting in the UGMA or UTMA is intended to pay for college, use that first, and then you can tap other resources so that you get that off the book, because you're going to fill out your FAFSA every single year. Now, sometimes people say to me like, oh, I can't believe I'm being penalized for saving for school. No, you're not. You saved, let's say you used a 529 plan, or you had it sitting in an UGMA or UTMA account, right? It has been growing in that 529, or this would be true for a Coverdell as well. It's been growing tax-free, right? You're going to use that growth tax-free when you withdraw that money. And that growth has far surpassed this little tiny 5.64% assessment rate. If you don't save for college and you have to take out loans to supplement that educational experience, the interest on those loans is also going to surpass this little 5.64% assessment. Saving for college is good. There are 2 big mistakes that we see that people make on their FAFSA routinely. When you're filling out your FAFSA, you should not be including any retirement accounts, so no qualified retirement accounts. And if you have questions about any of your accounts, your advisor at BridgeQuest is a good place to go to say, like, is this a qualified retirement account? Should I be including this? That's a good place to ask that question. And then the other major asset that people have that does not go on the FAFSA is your home. So no retirement and not your home. So your big investment vehicles are not going on the FAFSA. So there's some pretty significant FAFSA changes. These were passed in the CARES Act, which was the pandemic relief bill in December of 2020. This was 1,500 pages of FAFSA changes in a 5,000-page bill. It's very clear that no one did research and no one really read the bill. As we go through these changes, you will see what I mean. So the changes are going to roll out in 2024. So on the 2024 FAFSA, one of the things, oh, and I need to change my slide. So they just announced that that 2024 FAFSA will not be available in October when it normally would be available, but it will be available in December. Originally, they announced January. They've been able to push that back a month. So as mentioned, the verbiage expected family contribution goes away. The new verbiage is student aid index. One of the biggest changes coming to this FAFSA is in the number of questions. So 108 questions on the current FAFSA are going to drop away to 30 or 36, depending on the complexity of your financials. One of the questions that falls away, sadly, is the question that asks about how many kids you have in college at the same time. Why does this matter? Because on the current FAFSA that does ask about that, The formula adjusts for that. So on the 2023 FAFSA, if a family indicates that we have 2 kids in college, the formula adjusts. And now instead of assessing your income at 47% for your students, it's going to adjust student 1, we're going to assess at 23.5%, and student 2, we're going to assess at 23.5%. So still 47% for your family for both kids, but not per student. On the new FAFSA, the question that asks about how many kids you have in college goes away. And so guess what happens? There's no formula adjustment. And so for student 1, your income will be assessed at 47%. And for student 2, your income will be assessed at 47%. So now for your family, the presumption is you can send 94% of your income off with your students to college, which is a ridiculous number, right? 47% is ridiculous. Most people don't plan to spend half of their income on college. So I think it's important to understand folks getting hurt here are traditionally that middle class space, right? So high net worth earners were never going to qualify for need-based aid, so they're still not going to qualify. Lower income folks are going to qualify for less, which is challenging. But folks who traditionally might have seen need-based aid come their way with 2 kids in college are now probably not qualifying. Now, what we don't know is how the colleges are going to handle this, but it's not looking super helpful for families who are going to have multiple kids in college at once. The formula around divorce is going to change as well. The thing that you need to know about this is only one parent is filling out the FAFSA in a divorce scenario, and the way you determine it on the new FAFSA is based on who is financially supporting that student more. Here's what we don't know. We don't know what that means, right? They haven't defined financial support yet. So more to come here. We've seen a sneak preview of the new FAFSA. And that one tended to want to tie it to dependency, but they haven't made that announcement, and that is not how the rule reads. So more to come here. Stay tuned is what I'll say. One of the few positive changes that came out of this new FAFSA law was that third-party contributors. Here I'm calling them grandparents, but they could be aunties, uncles, godparents, the family next door that just loves your kids so much. Anybody who wants to help your student pay for college can now do so, and it will have no impact on any of their financial aid. So that's good news. And then the definition around small business is also changing. So today there is an exemption for farmers and small business owners where they don't have to include the assets of their business as part of their FAFSA. On the new FAFSA, you will. Here's what we don't know. We don't know what assets mean. They haven't defined that yet. But for sure, it's going to include things like if you're a farmer and you own your land, that's going to be an asset that has to be put on there. If you're a manufacturer and you have unsold merchandise sitting in warehouses, that will have to be included. Certainly your checking and your savings accounts, more to come here as well, but just plan on the assets of your business. Now, if you own a business and it's mostly a services-based business, you probably don't have many assets to worry about. Excuse me. Matt, maybe we can take questions now. This would be a good time before we roll into scholarships.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think a couple of the questions were around just really practical ways. One of the questions was, hey, what are the practical ways to look for scholarships, especially if maybe they don't qualify for grants?
Yeah, so we're going to cover that in the next section. So let me hold off and we'll talk specifically about that.
Great. I think the other one that you may touch on as well is, really kind of helping. I think it probably fits under the social, kind of understanding cultural fit of the college and university. So that was another question that popped up. Yeah,
for sure. That speaks back to the point that I made at the beginning, right? When you build goals, it should be built under 3 key categories. The first is academic fit for the student. The second is social fit, right? So you want to think about, like, who am I going to go hang out with on that campus? What's the culture on that campus? What's the personality of the campus? And then all the other fun things like size, location, your ability to carry forward things that you do in high school. So if you play a sport and you would like to continue playing, but you don't plan to play at the collegiate level, do they have club or IM teams that you could join? I have a kid right now who is a robotics kid. He wants to look for schools who have robotics teams, right? So he can continue to do that because he thinks it's really fun, but he doesn't plan to major in that. So thinking about that social fit piece is an important part for sure.
Yeah, good. Those are a couple. I think there's a couple more, but I might wait to the end to do that. I'm breathing again after you mentioned 90,000 at a school. I kind of had to like dial down, but then you brought me back. You brought us back a little bit to say, okay, good news. There's ways to mitigate some of those things. So
yeah, the good news is there are schools you can look at that way. The bad news is you can't get that done at NYU. So it's still going to be 90 grand.
Yeah. All right. Very good.
I'll pop forward. Folks, if you have FAFSA questions, don't be shy. Go ahead and raise your hand. I'm happy to take it in the next round. Okay, so I have another quiz for you. Where do scholarships come from? Do you think they come from specialty programs through the federal government? Do they come through online sources like those scholarship aggregators where you can go out and apply for scholarship dollars? Do you think they come through the colleges, through the application and acceptance process? Or is the best source for scholarships local groups like community groups, churches, maybe your employer, a bank, something like that? I'm going to give you a second to think about it. And we're going to tackle merit aid. And the reason that we're tackling merit aid along with that scholarship question is because that's what merit aid is. Merit aid is scholarship money that the colleges make available for your students. And the way that families traditionally think about this is, my kid's so awesome, everybody's going to love them, they can't wait to throw money at them. Here's the deal. Well, it's true, your kids are awesome. Merit aid is a business decision. Colleges do not make heartstrings decisions, right? They are not on the heartstrings decision-making chain. They are making business choices. And so when they accept a student, it's a business decision. And when they decide to give away money, it's a business decision. So I think it's important for you to put your business hat on here and ask yourself, why would a school give away money? And it's important to keep this in mind as we go through here, because the schools are bringing money to the table for kids who help them with things that they care about, the things that matter to the college. All right, so to answer our quiz, the best scholarship money goes to smart searchers, and smart searchers are investigating their colleges at a deeper level. So aligning who your student is with what schools would actually be interested in bringing money to the table for my student is the way to maximize your scholarship opportunities. Colleges are the #1 gifter in the scholarship space. They literally give away millions every single year. Our class of 2022 earned more than $23 million in scholarship dollars. 23 million, right? And that was just through the application process. I think that's really important. And when colleges give away money, they're giving it away for 4 years. So this is your #1 choice. #2 on the list are colleges yet again, right? So colleges are #1 and #2 on the scholarship path here. So after your student gets accepted and they get their first round of scholarship dollars, you'll get an acceptance email, right? And it says something like, congrats, you're a bear, a beaver, a gopher, a duck, or some other woodland creature. And in that email, there's a link for additional scholarship dollars. Kids miss this. Why? Because they are terrible email readers, right? They have not learned. I always joke that if the colleges would communicate via TikTok or if they would communicate via text, kids would be all over this. but they don't. They communicate via email and the student portal on their websites. And so kids miss these deadlines all the time. So be watching for that acceptance email and then grab those deadlines and go crazy. Again, when the colleges give away money, it's given away in thousands of dollars, and it does typically last all 4 years. Number 3 on the list would be local scholarships. These are okay to apply to, right? You'll notice though, our triangle's getting smaller as we go down. These tend to be lower value amounts, right? So congrats, you won $500. Cost of attendance is $27,000. $500 does not move your needle very far, right? Congrats, you bought a book. So it's important, yes, apply if you like, just keep in mind that it actually isn't going to move the price of your university very far. And classically, these are one-shot deals. So you apply once, you get them once, and then they're done. Where I would spend absolutely no time, zero amounts of time, is out in the private scholarship landscape online. Do not sit your kid in front of a laptop and think they're going to earn thousands of dollars. It just does not work out. The average student here has to apply to between 50 and 80 of these, 50 and 80 of these. Think about the time investment there. And the average award amount, $500. So your student would be better off just getting a job, candidly, and working the summer before college. They would earn more money. So colleges are where you look for your scholarship dollars. So what are they looking for? The first thing you need to know is, do they actually even offer merit aid? So now we're in the merit aid bucket, right? We talked about need. Need-based aid is based on the outcome of the FAFSA and other financial aid forms. Merit aid is based on the factors your student brings to the table that the colleges are interested in. There are lots of schools in the country right now that do not offer a penny of scholarship dollars. So those first schools on my big list earlier, no money available at any of those schools, right? If your student wants to go to any of the Ivies, if they want to go to Northwestern, UChicago, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, Duke, Rice, name your super selective school here, there is no money available to them to go to that school in the merit bucket. Those schools all do need-based aid, but they do not bring merit aid to the table. So when you go to their website and it says the average student pays, that student is getting need-based aid. If you're not going to qualify for need, none of that money will come to the table for you. And think about it this way. If I'm a school and I have an acceptance rate of 3%, 7%, 12%, 18%, there is no good reason for me to discount my pricing. I don't have to. Most of those schools can fill their freshman classes anywhere from 3 to 5 times. That's how many applicants they're getting today. So there's no good reason for them to discount their pricing. So you need to be looking at schools where merit aid is available and your student is interesting to them. So here's some ways to start to think about that. Yes, numbers matter in this game, right? So looking at schools where your student's GPA or test score is slightly above the incoming average for that school. And every school's numbers are different, right? So you want to be looking at schools where your students' numbers are slightly above the incoming average for that college or university. Extracurricular talents matter. Positioning yourself well on the application matters. It is not a check the box moment. Here's the thing though. Here's where people miss the mark. Quality of activities always beats quantity of activities. Better for your student to go deep than just go wide and shallow. And then be demographically interesting. This is super easy to do. And most of us miss the mark here, including me back in the day when I told my kids, go anywhere you want as long as you stay in the state of Minnesota. You are demographically interesting if you leave your region. The average student, right? 50% of kids go within 100 miles of their house to college, 50%. And I always joke that 49 of the other 50 go to 103 miles away from their home, right? people stay close because kids talk big, and then when push comes to shove, they just can't do it. So you are demographically interesting. If most of you live in Kansas and Missouri, if you just step over your borders, right, look at another school, look at other regions. It is a better deal often to leave your region than to stay inside of it.
Okay,
right.
can we stop that one? That was really, really good for those of us. It's sort of I know it's not the formula, but man, that is so good on the scholarship side. So really, really helpful.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. Let's break this down a little bit even then. This is a very common recipe card. This one happens to come from one school, but it's not just one school, or I wouldn't bother to share it with you, right? This is very common practice. So I'm going to break down how schools are thinking about scholarships. Now, you would not get this outline from them, right? The money would come to you in the Ann B. Smith Scholarship, the Presidential Scholarship, the Bulldog Scholarship, right? They aren't going to break this down for you, but I'm going to. So take a peek at how the schools are thinking, and you can start to see their business metrics as you play this out. The first category here is something called demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest is a college's understanding of the student's interest level. The more they interact with the student, the better they feel about their ability to reel that student in and put them in a chair. And so kids who have interacted often with the school will see better financial packages than kids who don't. Look at this. At this school, if you live outside their state, they're bringing as much as 15 grand. Now, of course, this 15 grand kid is that rare kid, right? The Alaska kid or the Hawaii kid. But interestingly, I don't know the number for Kansas, and I apologize for that, but in the state of Minnesota, 74% of our kids stay in the state or touch one of our border states. It's probably very similar for Kansas. And so consequently, Minnesota kids are kind of rare. Think about 50 states, 3,000 schools, and only 26% of our kids are going to any of those schools, right? So that makes Minnesotans pretty rare. It probably makes Kansans pretty rare too. For every A on the student's transcript, the school adds them up. For every rigorous class, same thing, they add them up, multiply by a factor. For an excellent letter of recommendation, they're putting money together. And then for every point above this school's average ACT score, your student's score is, they're giving $4.25 per point. What are they paying for here? They're paying for students who are going to be successful on their campus. That's what they're looking for, right? And you don't have to be, I want to be really clear. There's this misnomer floating through high schools that somehow if I'm not the 3.8, 3.9, 4.0 kid, I'm not going to get any scholarship money. That is blatantly false. Just for filling out your FAFSA, $1,800. Just for filling out the form, right? Fill in your form. For filling out your CSS profile, $2,500. So this school uses both. Look at this. If you decide man, I'm not going to spend any time filling out that stupid form, we're not getting any cash, you are walking away from scholarship dollars, not need-based money. This is merit-based money to the tune of $4,300 times 4 years, right? My time totally worth 17 grand. I will fill out the forms.
Cozy,
go ahead.
Can I ask on that point? Sorry to jump in, but I do think this is kind of at the heart of it's kind of scholarships and how to go about it. What you're saying is it doesn't necessarily have to be a straight A student to get the money in a lot of these categories.
That's correct.
Okay, so the letter of recommendation, for instance, that's a space that's available, but maybe people don't understand that that's available.
That's correct. So, and part of the reason this is true, right? Like I said, schools aren't going to share this with you. One of my kids, and you may or may not be familiar with this school, it's in Iowa. One of my kids applied to Drake University, right? Drake's in Des Moines, private college. At the time she went, 50 grand a year. Elise was, I would call her an average student, right? She was a 3.4, 3.5, something like that. I don't remember her ACT score. It wasn't notable. She has her mom's English brain, not her dad's math brain, sadly. So she did not blow away the ACT. She did not have 27 things on her activity list. She mostly worked. At the end of the day, Drake came back with an initial package of $26,000. This was an average student, right? So wow. That's where I just want people to think about this, right? I want people to know, if your student is not the straight A kid, there is still scholarship money out there. There just is, because there are a lot of schools, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit about how you start to think about this. But there are a lot of schools that want to make sure that they fill their freshman class with really steady students that they can count on to be successful on their campus and finish. That's what they're thinking about, right? So think about this as a business decision, because that's how the colleges are thinking about it.
Absolutely. Great.
The last thing I want to point out here is that the essay at this school can be worth a lot of money. Lots of kids think that the essay is a check the box moment, like check, I did an essay. We spend a lot of time with our students on their essay. You should too. The essay becomes an important part of the acceptance process, but also an important part of the scholarship process. So let's talk about the changing landscape. The first thing, let's talk about test optional, because still today, lots of people think that test optional means that the colleges don't care about the test. It is not what test optional means. Test optional means that it's optional for the student to send it. It does not speak to what the college may or may not do, whether you do or do not send it. So it's important to keep that in mind. Our coaching remains the same. Students should do a well-prepped test, probably twice, and then you can call it a day, but well-prepped. And by well-prepped, I don't mean I put the book on my nightstand and it stayed there. That's not a well-prepped test. So the schools are often accepting students at higher rates who have test scores. Now, if your student is a good test taker, then there are other things that you can do to elevate that application. But I just don't want people to think that the test is irrelevant, because it is not. It could not be further from the truth. And in fact, for the class of 2025, we're seeing more schools step back into the test required. And once that domino fell, a lot of schools are just going to follow suit. Acceptance trends. Interestingly, the test optional landscape has really changed the way that colleges are behaving because of the volume of applicants they are getting. So the big brand name schools are getting significantly more applications than they have ever gotten in their history. Purdue, 2 years in a row, has maxed out their system to say, we're going to defer the highest number of students we've ever deferred in the history of our school because we can't get through all these applications. It's pretty common practice today. We're seeing wait lists and deferrals increasing pretty notably at the big brand schools. The other thing that's happening here is tier 2 schools. So tier 2s would be schools where their acceptance rates are traditionally in the 20 to 30%. Tulane, Tufts, Case Western, Wake Forest, BU, BC, Northeastern, University of Miami. These schools are now behaving like tier 1 schools because their acceptance rates have been cut in half. So these schools went from 20 to 25% acceptance rates to under 15%. Once that happens, once the schools get acceptance rates that sit under the 15% mark, guess what happens? I don't have to give away money anymore. Why would I do that, right? I have more applicants than I need. And the other thing that you see is that kids have to do more to be interesting to those schools. And I'll talk about that here in a couple of minutes. Secondary factors, no question, are holding a higher role in the acceptance process, especially if the school is a big believer of the test optional practice, or your student has opted not to submit a test score. You want to make sure that you have other things balancing that world out, like demonstrated interest, a rigorous high school curriculum, or the essay. All of these factors could certainly play a role. I get a lot of questions about pricing and merit aid. Hey, Cozy, there's a student cliff coming. Aren't the colleges worried? Aren't they planning to start reducing costs? Well, not NYU, not anytime soon, right? They went from 83,000 to 90 grand in 1 year. We have seen pretty significant increases this past year, about 5%, which is higher than most schools. Clearly, they're making up for the COVID, where a lot of them just stagnated during the COVID years. Now, are there deals to be had? Absolutely. Are they at the schools that you can just rip the name off the top of your head? Absolutely not, right? So it's important to know that you're going to have to dive deeper than all the schools I'm familiar with if you want to get good deals on college. Let me pause quick and just see, Matt, if we have any questions before I start talking about, budgets and how to think about budgeting.
Yeah, I think we have one other.
Because you have a quick question. This is Greg. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Hey, can you speak just a little bit more toward, it's interesting that when you said in terms of activities, the quality versus quantity, 20 plus years ago when I was in that position, right? It was like resume boosting, as many clubs and activities that as you could show.
Yep.
Can you maybe speak a little bit more in depth on that, or even examples that jump out in that quality versus quantity of extracurriculars?
Yeah, for sure. Great question, Greg. So 2 things I want to say. Whatever your student's into is fine. And so there's a lot floating through, like Facebook groups, for instance, for parents whose kids are searching for colleges, that for some reason they think you have to have a sport. You don't have to have a sport. If your kid is not a sport kid, it's fine, right? What I tell people is go deeper. Whatever your student is currently doing is fine. Just go deeper with it. So I'm going to use my own student as an example. So my youngest daughter was a dancer, ballet, not kickline. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just want to distinguish it. So she spent a lot of time in the conservatory where she was taking lessons in high school dancing. She was there 20 hours a week. There wasn't a lot of time to do much else. However, when they did the fairy festival and needed dancers, guess who showed up? So she went, she danced and helped little kids make fairy wings, right? When they needed an assistant teacher for the 3 and 4-year-olds, guess who raised her hand, right? So she took her dance and just went deeper. She didn't join Glee Club because it might look good, and then track because it might look good, and then art club, and then French club, and, right? The colleges want to know who you are. That's what your application is all about. So join things and do things because they matter to you, and take those things that you do. So let's say you are a sport kid. We have a kid who's a big lacrosse player. He doesn't have a lot of extra time, but in the summer, I think this is amazing, and his parents, by the way, amazing. He runs a camp for 8 and 9-year-olds in his backyard. It is a fitness camp. He markets it. He prices it. Yes, he charges for it, and then he donates that money. So he turns this, I run this small business, into, I also give away money, right? So he took this thing he's passionate about, which is working out and being fit, and just went deeper. His other thing is lacrosse. So he's got this camp and lacrosse, and that's his stuff. That's it. But man, does it speak volumes about him. So that's how I would think about it. Any other questions? All right.
I have a couple, but let's wait. I know you've got more material to get through, Cozy.
Yeah, for sure. So my 3rd tip is start to build a strategy for paying for college. What do I mean by that? I mean, start to think about your family philosophy. Like, what do we believe as a family is what we should be doing in terms of who should pay for college? Create a 4-year game plan, and then a budget that fits it, right? So physically, where is money coming from for every single year of college? Lots of people figure out freshman year and then they leave the rest till later. You want to actually figure out, like, where is money coming from in year 1, 2, 3, and 4? To talk about this early in the process, right? Spring of senior year is a terrible time to start to have this discussion, because you don't want to go tour the Porsche schools where your kid falls in love with the Porsche school when you plan to pay for the Chevy Malibu, right? So start to have this conversation, get everybody on the same page, and then talk about and define expectations. Look, as parents, we plan to bring X to the table, if anything. As our student, right, we would like you to contribute Y, if anything, right? So start to just parse that out. And then my last tip for you, attack your search like the business decision that it is. The colleges are thinking that way. They're standing solidly in their own corners. You should too. Find schools that align with your students' learning style. Not every college is a monolith. They aren't all sit in giant lecture halls, butt in chair, take lots of lecture notes, and take a final. There are experiential learning colleges. There are cooperative programs where you're working while you're learning. There are schools that make it easy to double and triple major. There are all kinds of ways to think about that academic fit piece and start to have that conversation now. You should know that sometimes when schools give you the price tag, that's the price, and sometimes it is not. And if it's spring of senior year and you're looking at your packages, sometimes you can do something called appealing, which is in essence negotiating. You have to have the right schools on the list though. And you've got to have multiple schools. So you can't have your kid just apply to one or two, right? You've got to have multiple schools. The other thing I want to point out here is that public institutions really don't do this. Look at programs and majors available, right? This jumps back to that academic fit. Lots and lots of kids don't know what they want, which is fine. It's fine, right? They're 17. They're going to change their mind. The stats say they are. 80% of the kids who sit in front of me are going to change their mind when they tell me like, oh, I'm going to be this. Most of those kids don't end up in that major. So just build in some elbow room, give them room to grow and understand who they are and what they might be good at. And then I've mentioned this a couple times, it is not enough anymore to just be smart. If you want to go to those more selective schools, those big brand, I know the name. If you are targeting that style of school, your student's going to need to have more research projects, arts projects, service projects. There's just more that needs to happen with that student. So a little bit about us, and then I do want to take your last questions. Just like real estate agents help you find a house, we help people find colleges. You can do it yourself, and certainly if your student just wants to go to University of Kansas and they have the right creds to get in, you don't need help. But if your student widens their search, it's often actually that people leave money on the table. We do help families navigate the entirety of the search process. That national transfer rate at 38% changes when we work with families. It drops to under 4%. Fit is our goal. We do ensure you get the best pricing for the schools on your list, but this is my favorite thing that we do. I mentioned I have 5 kids. 4 are girls. They have all mastered the eyeball roll, and I never get to be the smartest person in the room, ever, right? We get to be a neutral third party because we're not you. Okay, so here's the coolest thing I want to be able to do for anybody who wants it. I sit down every single day and do free consultations every single day. What are we going to do during our hour together? You're going to bring your student along and we're going to sit down and chat college. We'll sit for an hour. I start everyone the same way. Tell me what you guys want to talk about. And that's what we talk about. We'll talk about your goals. So we'll sit down and talk about academic fit, social fit, financial fit. I can give you a rough student aid index so you'll understand, are you one of those families that might get need-based aid or no? You should just be looking at merit. So I'll give you an understanding of that. All right, let's take, and by the way, if you have a sophomore or junior, that's ideal time to get started. So take advantage of that family consultation. I'd love to sit down with you and chat college. It is bar none my favorite thing to do. I think high school students are amazing. And when they get good information, they make good decisions. Okay, last questions.
Wow, this is great. Couple of things. And what's great is I've heard a lot of this, but I always glean something new when I listen to Cozy and get these tips. And of course, I've got a high schooler. But here's a couple. I just want to highlight a couple things that are just kind of mind-blowing to me. And then if anybody else in the last couple minutes here has a question, just do the raise hand and we'll get to you. We are going to wrap up. But I wanted to say, first of all, holy cow, 14K. I mean, I'm a numbers guy. $14,000 just for the wrong choice on average. I know that can be higher and lower, but that's a pretty big cost of getting it wrong. So I'm like, okay, this is worth the investment of time. There's
sure.
no other reason for that. And then I'm back to okay, $1,800 for letter of recommendation. And then I saw up to like 10K for a good essay. Okay, those numbers speak my love language. So that is fantastic. Like, that is just really good. This arms us with, okay, as we got all this stuff hitting us at this stage of life. But I just want to encourage everybody, take the time to really sink in, because we all hope, and now we know there's a pathway, that's potentially can be really, really impactful. Side note, good news, grandparents, 529s, lots of clients that we've had to play the wait until they're after their sophomore year. Now we don't have to play that game, or at least later in, I don't know, next year maybe.
No, actually, they can start right away, because the question drops away on the 2024 FAFSA, but it's an income question, and income has a 2-year look back. So actually starting in 2022, they were able to start contributing. So as of this moment in time, grandmas, grandpas, aunties, uncles can contribute, and it has no impact. So
we love that as financial planners. Anyhow, as we wrap up, I just want to thank everybody, for attending, for listening. We will have a replay. There's a lot of folks that I know wanted to get a copy of this, and it's going to be a great resource. Take advantage of Cozy's offer with College Inside Track. Again, even if you just spend that hour, it could be this great jumpstart. And I can speak from practical experience for you and your spouse. If you're just going, oh my goodness, where do we start? That's a great starting place. And there are resources to help, I would say, us navigate through this. And of course, we'll partner with you on the financial side as you start navigating all of that. So again, I just want to say thank you so much, Cozy, for sharing your time, your expertise with us.
Yeah,
and thanks everybody for attending.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.
Take care, everyone.